All right, so our next speaker is going to build right on what Steve was sharing with us, because it's Tom Brazil, whom you already know. And Tom, if you don't mind, no, you can come on up. But I've been working with Tom for a little while, and so in my mind, and this is intended as a compliment, Tom is the perfect innovation nerd, and as one myself, you know, like I said, I consider that a compliment. Last week he sent me a link to a website which perfectly characterizes what I'm interested in and what he's interested in. The website was called Best Data Visualization of 2018. So with that, there you go. Thank you, Tom.
So, as the name implies, this is about managing innovation for the DoD, but it's from the perspective of a government contractor, so it's kind of the opposite of what you just heard from Steve Wallace, innovation for the DoD from the government's perspective. So, but it's also, where's the clicker? Here we go. Yay. It's also about building and managing the right innovation portfolio. And this is important, and I say right because in the context of everything that we've been talking about over the last 2 days, that portfolio is under pressure of maintaining a constant alignment with your strategic intent. And that's important because in this era of exponential change, it's hard to keep up. You have to stay in perfect alignment at all times. And so how do you do that? That's a great question back there. Is innovation management an oxymoron? And I'm here to say, no, it's not. Recently, there was a big shift that happened at the national level, which is having a rippling effect. It's having an exponential effect throughout the DoD ecosystem. But what does exponential really mean? Do we really understand it? So I'm sitting here tearing this piece of paper, doing an exponential function right in front of you to try to bring context to this, make it tangible so you can understand it. Because we say things like the pace of change you're experiencing now is the slowest it's ever going to be. That doesn't mean anything. It's not tangible. You can't convert it to your context. And that's important. You got to be able to understand it in your own context. Right? So I started out with 0.01 centimeters, and after 9 times, I'm about the thickness of a ream of paper it was sold in. It's tangible. I can understand that. That's within my context. I can visualize it. If I do it 27 times, this stack is the tallest structure on the planet. It is taller than Mount Everest, and if I do it 15 more times, I'm halfway to the moon. I started from 0.01 centimeters, and that's 42 doublings. I'm 125,000 miles tall. Now let's imagine that the original piece of paper is the Industrial Revolution, and where I'm at today, quantum computing, AI, ML, augmented reality, that's the 42nd doubling, okay? What happens the next time? We go all the way to the moon, another 125,000 miles, but with all of the ramifications between Industrial Revolution and quantum computing. So can you grasp it? I can't. I tried. It's impossible. So what do? You try to maintain continual alignment with your strategic objectives in the pace of change. That means you don't worry about everything. You worry about your own context. What impacts you? What impacts your interested parties, your organization, etc. So let's talk about that. First part of this presentation, you might be wondering about the Innovation Fishbowl. Every conference I go to, somebody has this picture somewhere in their presentation, and you know, I wanted to keep the streak alive, and I'm glad I did. So, but the first part is going to be about understanding a driving force of change that happened about 13 months ago at the national level, and the second part is going to be Agile innovation management for your portfolio, okay? So let's go back 13 months. December 2017, we had a new national security strategy that was put out by the President. This is a statutorily mandated document, and it informs the other branches of government, federal agencies, our partners and allies, the American people, exactly how the President is going to execute his national security vision. So it's a big deal, and it had some significant changes for the innovation world. So it had 4 main pillars, and all of them had DoD impact. First one is obvious: protect the American people, the homeland, the American way of life, etc. The second pillar was promote American prosperity with an emphasis on extra support for research, technology, invention, innovation in the commercial industry and defense industry in support of number 3, which was preserving peace through strength, which is innovation for military modernization, right? So the number 2 and number 3 kind of go together. Number 4 was advance American influence, and that's really about maintaining freedom for common domain areas, air, land, sea, cyber, etc. So 4 pillars, 2 of which are related to innovation. Now, that's the first driver. Second driver. 2 months later comes out the new National Defense Strategy, okay? They were probably being worked on at the same time, as you can imagine, but there's a 2-month gap. So 2 months later, NDS comes out, and this is the first time an NDS has come out since 2008. Now, there have been intervening strategy documents, lots of them, as a matter of fact, but not a national defense strategy. And if you go back to 2008 and read that one, the word innovation appears 1 time. 2018, it is peppered all over the place, along with the language of innovation and experimentation and prototyping, etc. And you'll see what the deal is here. So now we have the National Defense Strategy, and there's 3 lines of effort. These 3 lines of effort, number 1 is building a more lethal force, and backing that up is building a culture of experimentation, right? Not that there wasn't experimentation already, but it's more it's expanding at a greater rate. So, and that focus now is, and they talk about it, it's autonomy, AI, ML, and that's why you see the expanded focus in a lot of different places, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Second part was partnerships, strengthening alliances, new partners, statecraft, not a lot of innovation there. Number 3 was reform, changing the way we do business. This is a big deal. DoD, $700+ billion organization, and if you want to change that strategy at the top, can you imagine the ripples that occur all the way down throughout the organization? It's the largest employer in the United States, largest organization in the world when you think about it. So they are now organizing for innovation. That means streamlining processes for faster acquisition, partnering with industry, as we learned in the NSS. So now you have 2 pillars of the NSS that are about innovation, and 2 of the 3 lines of effort in the National Defense Strategy that are about innovation. So now you have this ripple effect. So let's visualize this. You have NSS, the trigger, you have impacts to the National Defense Strategy, and then the departments: Army, Navy, Air Force, Office of the Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs, etc. You have combatant commands, unified commands, functional commands. There's 10 of those, and you have agencies. There's dozens. The big ones like DISA, you just heard Steve Wallace, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and then there's a host of others. You have units like the Defense Innovation Board, Defense Innovation Unit. You have federally funded research and development centers, university affiliated research centers, small business innovation research, tech transfer, AFWorks, SoftWorks, TeamWorks, a lot of these innovation units, the National Defense Industry Association, and of course the thousands and thousands of government contractors and traditional and non-traditional in the industry that are supporting the DoD that are impacted by this, right? So I bring the red one, DTIC, up because if you haven't innovated before for the DoD and you want to innovate for the DoD, that's your one-stop shop. That's Defense Technical Information Center. They run the Defense Innovation Marketplace, and it has a boatload of information. It's everything you need, and they align capability with need throughout the defense ecosystem. So it's a very nice site for you to visit. So, reviewing part 1, understanding the driving forces of change, national security strategy, national defense strategy, and then in part 2, we're going to talk about, okay, there's the ripple effect, all this exponential change is happening, everybody's strategy is changing, all the strategic objectives are changing down the line, what do you do? So, innovation management. Yeah, it doesn't have to be overbearing, it has to be agile. So let's talk about that. First, I want to define some terms just to make sure we're talking on the same level, because this is going to impact the rest of the presentation. Vision, it's about who you want to be, who you want to become, okay? Our company, as an example, ICS, has a vision to be the company everybody wants to work for, everybody wants to do business with, and everybody wants to own. Am I ever going to be part of a team that achieves that? No. It's a vision. It's just outside of our grasp, but we're going to reach for it, right? So that's not going to change. What will change is strategy, okay? Because strategy is the plan to achieve the vision. It's a plan. It's not executable by itself. It's the plan. Underneath that, you have the executable, measurable pieces of strategy, the strategic objectives. And those objectives, depending on events and conditions, can change priority, can change their weighting. Their import changes, okay? And then, of course, in response to that, you have the innovation portfolio, which is created in response to the strategic objectives, whose members and whose weightings can change. So if you think about the change that occurs, you have frequency of change from the top to the bottom, going from low to high. So the portfolio management, and agile portfolio management, is extremely important to adapt to the pace of change. So I was at a conference in October, a Gartner conference, and there was an analyst that was speaking about innovation, and he had a quote that kind of struck me and put me off a little bit. He said, innovation tends to be episodic and sporadic. And at first I was pissed off, and then I had to analyze myself and why I'm upset, because I used to feel the exact same way until we implemented a system, okay? And that's important to understand. You got to have a system for innovation management. It doesn't have to be overbearing. It can be lightweight, but you have to be agile. So what we've used is the Agile Innovation Master Plan. Now, we have 6 certified innovation managers in our organization, and so if you've taken that test, you'll know about the 5 key tracks of an effective innovation program, and they're very easy to figure out. Why is the strategy, right? Why are you innovating? It's related to your strategic intent. What are you innovating? That's your portfolio created in response to your objectives. How are you innovating? That's a rigorous process to make sure that you're efficient and that you're having a reliable and repeatable, consistent outcomes. And then who, right? So leadership, and this is an important part, because what I'm going to talk about in a minute here is how you integrate leadership into your innovation process in a lightweight manner, but hold them accountable. And then there's other members of culture, like your innovation managers. On our company, we have innovation council made up of our managers. They mentor, they manage their portfolio, and they remove roadblocks. And then, of course, your creative geniuses. And Dr. Ben Willett over here, if you want to raise your hand, he's a real rocket scientist, and on my staff I might be getting another one, so he is a creative genius that I lead on. And then the where, of course, is the infrastructure, the space and the infrastructure and the tools that support innovation. But for the purposes of the rest of the presentation, I'm only going to talk about the first 2, which is the why and the what, okay? So strategy being derived from vision. Let's do an exercise real quick. I am now the new Secretary of Defense. God help us all. And I have a vision. So here's my vision. I want to achieve warfighter supremacy. I want to be so dominant that I don't want the adversary to even think that innovation is going to help them a bit. Okay? So that's supremacy. That's what I'm after. So in order to achieve my vision, I need a strategy. That's just my plan, right? It's not something I'm going to execute yet. It's just the plan. So here's my plan to achieve warfighter supremacy. I'm going to efficiently outthink, outmaneuver, and out-innovate the adversary. Why efficiently? Because I'm SecDef and I'm also a taxpayer. So let's see how we do this. All right, so what do you have to do? I've got to take my strategy and break it down into executable, measurable strategic objectives that I can align my portfolio around. And I need to do it in a way that makes it agile, right? So I can adapt continuously. So here's an example. If I break that down into, say, 4 strategic objectives, and I assign weightings or priorities, everybody has heard in the organization, this is the most important thing for us right now. Or, hey, something's come up, we're changing priorities, this is now the most important. Or this condition occurred, or this event occurred, etc. You have to change priorities. So we do all this with analytics and algorithms and stuff like that, but you can do it with a spreadsheet. It doesn't matter. So for my objective, being the SecDef, I'm going to have the addressing autonomy, AI, and ML at about 40% weighting for my portfolio, streamlining acquisition for rapid acquisition to be ready, and that's, the outmaneuver part of my vision. And then I want agile capability development, and which is out innovate. And then I want to optimize and reduce costs as a taxpayer. And it's about 10%, but hey, $700 billion budget, that's a pretty good chunk of change. Next condition changes here. What happens? We go into a war footing because the DEFCON increases, somebody lobbed a missile somewhere, who knows, right? But now, in real time, my strategic objectives stay the same, but my weightings change. For example, optimize, reduce cost, not so concerned. My objective is to win a war that's coming up, right? As an example. So I don't care about cutting costs and pinching pennies and squeezing out efficiencies right now. I do care about streamlining acquisition for capability, right? So I can quickly get capability into the hands of the warfighter, et cetera. So that's just an example. And then on the opposite side of this, what if you have sequestration in a time of peace or budget cuts, et cetera? So my weightings change again. And what do you do now? Well, optimize, reduce costs goes from 10 to 20%, right? So that's become more important. I still want to achieve my vision, so I'm not messing with my autonomy, AI, and ML, but I do need to reduce the streamline acquisition because I'm not in a war footing right now, but I'm going to keep agile because that's always a good practice. So, before the weighting changes, as an example, you had ideas and projects, active projects that were aligned to strategic objectives, and if the weightings change or the objectives themselves change, then you have a pivoting that takes place. Okay? And I'll talk about that in a moment. The little red dots in the bottom there, those are projects that were active until we pivoted. And they're not necessarily killed, but they're deferred. Different priorities, that's all. Okay, so you got to be able to pivot. That's like, we call it stop, pivot, and go. Okay? So in preparation for this, you have to have strategic objectives, and this is our point of view. Okay, it doesn't mean that this is going to be the same for every organization. The important point is that you're going to have a leadership mechanism that can perform some weighting or prioritization of things that you measure your portfolio by. That gets them accountable as part of the innovation portfolio management. And it makes sure that you are in strategic clarity at all times. Leadership changes strategy, portfolio changes automatically, okay? So our Innovation Council, we score things for closeness of fit. We also, based on leadership, they set objectives for how much risk they want to manage over the short, medium, and long term, and then we score the project for the type of innovation it is and make sure that we respect their weightings there for portfolio risk. And then I brought this one in here because I realize not everybody is going to be related to the DoD, but there's going to be product innovators out there, and I was in product innovation for 25 years. All right, so I get this. There are risk-reward factors that you can evaluate by as well, that strategic objectives can be related to as well for the weighting, et cetera. And you can score those for closeness of fit, and I'll give that example here. So in the top left, you'll see benefit to customers, enhances our brand, competitive advantage, and then in that first column, you'll see a weight. And that weight is what we have leadership configure. That's their responsibility. They say, this is what's important to us from a strategic level. Then you have accountable, competent people, our Innovation Council, rate ideas according to closeness of fit, and then you have a computation, right? So you end up with a score for reward factors for an idea. In the bottom, you have risk factors. Same thing. Leadership. What's important? What's their acceptable level of risk in these areas? Financial risk, disruption risk, technology risk, market risk, etc. They provide the weightings. Competent people do scoring. You get a score for the risk factors, right? So what does that look like? If you want to visualize it, and we do it computationally, but if you want to visualize it, here you just lay it up on a chart and you put your reward factors on the y-axis and your risk factors on the x-axis, and you find out that what you have is in the top right corner, you got a sweet spot with low risk, high reward, and so when criteria change, you reevaluate your portfolio and things can change. Things that weren't important before are now important, okay? Things that were important, or things that weren't important before are, and things that were aren't, right? So whatever happens like that, it can change dynamically, and what we do at ICS is we use a combination of factors for evaluation, and then we use analytics and algorithms, okay? And you saw yesterday, there's a fellow up here from the venture capitalist And he was competing projects against each other algorithmically. And we started doing that 2 years ago for our innovation portfolio. It's very interesting, but we make it fun as well, right? So we can either compete projects against each other in a specific stage of the innovation process, like a selection pipeline or a funding pipeline, or we can have the algorithm select the next idea that is most in alignment with the current portfolio weightings related to strategic objectives. Or we can pivot the entire portfolio if one of the strategic objectives change or the weightings change, right? So it can realign everything for you. The great thing about this is that you eliminate completely pet projects, political influence, it's rapid, it's objective, and management can't have any say in it because as long as their strategic objectives are proper, everything's going to be aligned to it, okay? So again, we do strategic objectives, type of innovation over near, medium, and long term, and then we use algorithms to do the rest. So if you want any answers on all that nerdy stuff, there's Dr. Ben Willett over there. I'm sure he can answer anything that you want to know. But the point of the matter is this: innovation management is needed. Innovation management is necessary, but it must be lightweight and it must be agile to keep up with the pace of change. Thank you.